So my father was born in 1950 in Jerusalem, which was 2 years after the birth of the State of Israel. He was born to a German mother and a Lithuanian father, so the gastronomic landscape of his home could be described simply as dull. His mom's culinary repertoire included things like chicken soup and steak and potatoes, and on special occasions, boiled tongue. The only real excitement in the kitchen was on Thursdays when his mom would bludgeon to death a large carp that had only moments earlier been swimming happily in her bathtub. While the food in his home was nothing to write home about, the culinary culture of his infant nation was really coming up in leaps and bounds. The kishke, the kreplach, and the knishes of the Jewish shtetl were being joined by malawach and jachnun and kebabs of the Jewish Sephardic diaspora, by the ful and hummus and falafel and pita of Israel's Arab inhabitants and neighbors. Of this sort of gastronomic melting pot, it was falafel that had really captured my father's heart and his palate, and he would regularly go to Ben Yehuda Market to indulge in these messy, fragrant sandwiches. As he got older, these trips to the market became a tradition, representing not only a journey for great food, but also a celebration of his independence and of the independence of his young nation. In 1976, I came into the world, also in Jerusalem. 7 years later, my parents decided to trade their baba ganoush for bratwurst, and we moved to the frigid winters of Wisconsin. From that point forward, we would go every year, making a long pilgrimage back to Israel. And on these visits, my father and I would always find a few opportunities to sneak away to his falafel place in the market. On the way, he would tell me stories about his childhood in Israel, about how it felt to be one of the first kids in Jerusalem with roller skates, about the sense of purpose and unity that he felt as a Boy Scout and later on as a man in the Army. When we got to the market, we would quickly be engulfed by the sound of merchants advertising their wares, trying to outcompete each other both by price and by decibel. Similarly, the smells of the market were also in constant competition, the scent of fish and fresh pita, of spices, all trying to get a leg up on one another. As we approached his falafel place, I would head to this herd of small plastic chairs that were strewn haphazardly on the main thoroughfare. And I would watch him as he would go to his place and come back with 2 falafel sandwiches. He would sit down and we would begin the adventure of trying to eat these unwieldy monstrosities. Each bite was so satisfying and so unique. One would be dominated by the warmth and the crunchiness of the fritters, the next by the acidity of the brine pickles, the next by the spicy schug or by the sharp amba. And each bite was unified, held together by the warm, yeasty pita. And as we ate, we would watch the market in front of us. There were the Hasidic Jewish men with their fur-lined hats bobbing like otters in the sea of market shoppers. The ancient old women that would be schlepping their old carts behind them, laden with produce through the chaos. In this market, Jews and Arabs, Ethiopians and Russians, Ghanaians, Filipinos, young and old, would all come to buy and sell the same food, brought together and held together by the magic of the market. When I was 16, I started going to Israel by myself, and with every visit, I would make a point to go at least once to my father's falafel place. I would sit in the old plastic white chairs and I would eat the falafel. I would think about my father, and I would remember how, when eating with him, I would feel the most connected to my father and to my father's Israel. In 2004, my grandmother passed away. And for the first time in over a decade, my dad and I were in Israel together. After the funeral and the shiva were over, we made our way slowly through the old alleyways of Jerusalem to the market. I went slightly ahead of him, and by the time I got to his falafel place, I noticed that he was no longer beside me. I looked around and saw him standing in a patch of light that was being thrown on the sidewalk by the neighboring falafel place. I pointed to his falafel place. He shook his head and pointed to the place in front of him. And suddenly it dawned on me, all these years I'd been going to the wrong falafel place. I must have mixed it up the first time I came and then just repeated that mistake over and over. I was mortified. I looked at him, he motioned for me to come over, and I started towards him, but then something made me stop. And I stood there for a couple seconds. And then I pointed at my falafel place. He smiled and shrugged, placed his order. I placed mine. We met in the shadow between the two stands and laughed about the mix-up. He took a bite of mine, I took a bite of his, and like any good Israelis would do, we spent the next 15 minutes arguing vehemently about whose was better. I've been to Jerusalem several times since that night, recently with my own children. Every time I go, I make sure to go to my falafel place. Sometimes I sit on those white chairs, sometimes I stand in front of my place, sometimes in front of my father's place, which a few years ago went out of business and is now a candy store. And every time I savor the sense and the taste and the sounds of the market, and I feel connected to my father's Israel and to mine. Thank you.